So I'm really excited today because we've got Carmen here, who's over from the States, and she is here for Acumen in Conversation, and we're going to delve into some nitty-gritty conversation around student demographics in the US. We're going to talk about student motivations from the US, and generally just get to know Carmen a little bit better. So thank you so much for joining us today, Carmen.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you would be wonderful as to introduce yourself and your role that you currently are in and where you're based in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Carmen Malo. I'm the International Student Recruitment Officer for Imperial College London, and I'm based in the States in Wisconsin.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Carmen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it would be great for listeners to kind of understand a little bit more about you and how you came into this sort of role of being an in-country rep, supporting a UK university to recruit and to work more with international students from the US. So how did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a little bit of a long journey for me. I did study abroad in the UK at St. Mary's in Twickenham when I was in college. I went to University of Wisconsin-Platteville, so a really small campus. So coming over to London and just having like the big city experience and kind of getting out of my comfort zone, I was really keen to kind of study abroad a bit or go abroad a bit more. So after graduation, I lived in Taipei for a couple of years teaching English. And then I did a working holiday in Australia for a year. And then I worked at a university in Connecticut for a couple of years. And those jobs were like fairly recruitment focused, but there was kind of a mix of other elements in the department. So around the time I was in Connecticut, I was kind of really looking to just focus on recruitment, but I also wanted something where I was maybe getting US students abroad a bit more.
The US is, I would say, a really hot topic at the moment. I'm sure you're getting asked left, right and centre around the political situation, and we won't delve too much into the politics because I want to hear more about kind of what students are thinking and seeing and hearing and what you're hearing. But I think what would be really helpful to understand is kind of what are you hearing from students around, are there frustrations around studying domestically? Because my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen, you're the expert here, but a lot of the time when students are thinking about their options, as an international university, you're not only working against kind of other foreign universities, which are options for students, you're also competing against domestic universities in the US who are also wanting to get students to go to their programs. So what are domestic students in the US thinking and feeling at the moment from the conversations that you've been having?
You know, the last couple of years, even before the current situation, I think, you know, everyone's been pretty price sensitive. So I think the students really are looking for a good investment for their future. There are a lot of questions about, you know, the research and where they're going to go with their career after. And I've talked to a few students that are maybe concerned they're not going to have the same opportunities if they start the program and research grants get lost in the US. So I think that is a big driver of students looking at their other options overseas. And I think that is one thing that's really been changing. Probably the last 4 or 5 years that I've been working in this field is, like, when I was in school, it really was, you went for a semester or two and it was just a fun experience. And I think now these students really are looking at doing a longer term program and, you know, having a different experience than what maybe their parents or previous generations have done. So.
And are you finding there's more demand at an undergraduate or postgraduate level? Because I think study abroad it's always been a strong country for students to want to go and do a semester abroad or maybe just a summer program, for example. But are you seeing more of a trend and appetite towards studying a full degree or a master's degree? Is there any specific sort of program areas or anything that you're seeing a kind of shift in? Yeah,
I mean, I think both have been pretty strong with the growth. I think for the postgrad side, it is a lot of students that they either wanted to study abroad when they were in university, but they didn't get the opportunity because of the pandemic. And they're often finding universities through friends of theirs that they met in the UK that are familiar with the programs. And I think postgrad too, like there's usually professors that are more familiar with research abroad, so they maybe get connected that way with the programs. I think the undergrad, there is the option, like the interest. I think there's just a little bit more like barriers to that one with like the timelines in the US and the entry requirements and things like that. It just takes a little bit more of the research versus like the postgrad where they are just looking at their undergraduate degree usually for entry requirements.
And if we go back to kind of thinking about more options and for students, do you think that students are now looking beyond traditional destinations like the UK and Ireland, for example? Are they looking at Asian countries? Are they looking at the Middle East to study? Are you seeing any changes there at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ireland and UK are still like very strong for the US, but I think there's definitely been students I've talked to that are looking outside that, like South Korea. I think I've talked to students recently that were interested there. Like continental Europe, I think that's coming up a bit more. I've had students asking me about if I know any like resources for Germany or other countries. Australia, New Zealand, I think those are definitely big ones now too. So
Yeah.
but I think UK, Ireland is still probably the top of like the popularity list, but I think
Yeah.
definitely other students are starting to look around the world as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
You know, the UK isn't going to be the right fit for every student, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be great to understand from your perspective, because you're meeting with prospective students on a almost, I would say, daily basis, I guess.
Yeah.
What are the kind of big concerns that either the student or the family members have around studying outside of the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think the family side, definitely safety is always a big one, like campus
Yeah.
safety, kind of what resources we have on campus, how are the dorms, you know, are those secure?
Yeah.
I think definitely careers are always a big one too, especially for undergrad. A lot of the families are funding the studies for their child, so they just want to make sure, you know, it's going to be a good fit, that they're going to have a strong career prospect after they graduate. You know, I think both sides of it too. It's like the events they're going to have on campus. Like, are there, like US, we do have really strong facilities as far as like the student experience.
Yeah.
So I think they just really want to make sure there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them too while they're on campus to join clubs and kind of enjoy the activities on campus as well. So I think that's a big one that always comes up, is things like in the UK student union and like all the different activities they can join.
Yeah.
I think some of the things you have to translate is the expectation around sports abroad, because we are so used to having, you know, NCAA and the big stadiums and things like that on campus, or just to like kind of the like different events on campus. Like we do have you know, student events and things on campus, but they maybe aren't going to be the full like calendar that you would have at a U.S. university.
Yeah.
But being in a big city too, there's so many opportunities outside of the university campuses. So I think academically, it's a lot of conversations about just the structure. You know, coming from the U.S., we do general education, and a lot of universities outside of American universities abroad don't.
Yeah.
So setting that kind of expectation of what the calendar looks like, how registration works, it's very different with the timelines.
Yeah.
So there are just like a lot of conversations once you get past the initial, you know, options with like majors and the location.
And would you say that you come across students who maybe are concerned that the UK degree won't be recognised when they come back to the US? Is that like a common concern that students might have?
Yeah, I would say like a lot of families, especially at the undergrad side, I think they do worry that they're going to come back and it's not recognized. Which, you know, I actually I gave a presentation recently at a conference, and I showed the top 10 universities, and I think only 4 were the U.S. So I think, you know, really the universities outside the U.S. are highly ranked. I think we just don't have that in our culture very much about recognizing that. And so building those experiences abroad and having those skills to talk to people from, you know, different cultures and backgrounds, and having those different opportunities to communicate and build those skills early on and have that like critical thinking and independence, I think.
Yeah. And I guess like careers and the kind of return of investment, essentially, like families are looking for a return on the investment that they're going to pay for their child's education, and the student as well are looking for that as well. Would you say, is there anything that careers departments within universities could maybe think about in regards to US students? What are the types of things that they're looking for like the job at the end, or the careers guidance and support throughout? Is there anything that you think from a US lens it would be good for careers departments to kind of think about and consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is like kind of having some good examples of outcomes that previous students had, because I think that's one question that always comes up with the US is, you know, what percentage of graduates and moved on to careers, or what are previous students doing in the field.
So true. And how does it compare to the career services within US universities?
So I think that's kind of hard to compare because it does depend on the university, but I think for the ones that have like full programming, they're having events that are really well advertised throughout the year. They'll have like a lot of different options for, you know, if you're going into professional studies or going to postgrad, or, you know, different routes that you can take with your degree.
Yeah.
So I think the one, like, you know, those opportunities, that does kind of give them a lot of robust options for career support.
Yep. I guess one of the things I'm quite interested to hear is, because so much has happened and so much is still changing in the US, and like every day there's like something else in the news. And I know, as in your role, it must be so challenging to keep up with all of the different changes that are happening around higher education at the moment in the US. Is there anything that you're seeing that is, because of that influence, is impacting the demographics? So are there different sort of students who are now looking to study overseas and study outside of the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in the past, I think it was always kind of the bigger cities that universities looked at for recruitment. But I think, you know, the smaller regions I've been to, there's always been interest. So I definitely say, like, I encourage universities to really look at like rural communities or smaller areas, like ones that they maybe wouldn't traditionally reach out to as much. Because I think those counselors are really looking for the resources and the connections to international, because their students are asking the questions. They just really don't know how to advise them.
And how do you come across those schools? Like, is it that they're reaching out to you, or is it kind of luck of the draw, or is it through a network? Like, how do you find out and kind of pick a new city to kind of go into and to meet with different schools? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different ways. Like, one is, if you are kind of looking at a region, see if there's any schools that offer virtual visits. It's kind of diminished a bit since the pandemic, but there definitely are schools that are still offering it.
Yeah.
Because even if students don't come, you often get the counselor. And I think I've had some really great conversations with the counselor of just, is there the appetite for international? Like, what would help students kind of get to know their options a little bit better? What resources are they really looking to get?
Yeah.
Because often then, like, I either get connected with a lot of other counselors in that city, like, kind of organically.
Yeah.
Where they passed my email on, or I hear from the counselor, like, hey, I heard you visited 3 other schools in this area. Can you book a visit at my school too?
Nice.
Or you start getting the fair invites, like, for the next year and, like, start making those connections in person then.
Are you seeing any particular subject trends? So are there any sort of academic areas that you're seeing a shift in, or you're just hearing more inquiries around? I know it's difficult now because you're working for Imperial, so you're very much STEM focused, an amazing STEM university.
Yeah.
But are there any subjects that are kind of surprising you, interest that you're kind of hearing more from students?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the longest time, I think the U.S. was seen as a humanities market
Yes.
because we were known for liberal arts. I think, we were always kind of a big market for drama and arts and things like that. But I think so many high schools now are really developing robust STEM programs. So I think that is one, like, STEM schools, if you aren't looking at the U.S., it could be a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I know I've been to schools now where they have robotics teams and drone teams and, full-on engineering labs. So I think that is one that's definitely increased probably the last 5-6 years in the U.S., like really specialized programs. I think, too, just high schools are really looking to get their students specialized career support really early on now. I think that's been a huge shift because I think for the longest time we were a very broad education versus other countries where you did specialize in high school a bit more. That is one, like, where students are specializing a lot earlier than they did in the past.
Yeah.
So there's some that are like fine arts schools that do similar, or they are, going more technical with physics or engineering. So, but yeah, I think there's, still kind of niche ones too, like anthropology and things that always pop up. But yeah, I think the sciences, I think the market has definitely changed, but I think we're still kind of a little bit more known for the humanities. So
yeah, and it's really interesting you were saying about some students picking a sort of subject area earlier, because I think the US has always been known as being quite broad.
Yeah.
And then when you go into your degree, you still have that, because it's the 4-year degree versus a 3-year. It can sometimes mean that you're less niche immediately.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe that could help if more specialization is happening earlier? That it means that the 3-year degree and that kind of specialization that happens as part of that will become more accepted?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more students I talk to now where the second I tell them you don't have to do general education credits.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's definitely like an increase in students that are really just excited to specialize early on.
Yeah. And thinking about the humanities, because you're right, like I would say that predominantly if I'm thinking from a UK perspective, a lot of UK universities were recruiting a lot of humanities, social science students from the US. Mm-hmm. Would you say that there's a downward trajectory for those subjects then, or would you say there's still appetite and demand? It's just that students are broadening subject niches, or what would you say kind of for those faculties of humanities, social sciences? Would you say that there's still places that they can work with students? Are there certain locations that it's still the right sort of ones to target?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely still the appetite for it. I know, I would say, like, depending on the program, like, English is always still a really good one, creative writing.
Yeah.
I think being in London, like, drama is a huge appeal because there's, so many opportunities to get involved with theaters while in university. So I think there's definitely the opportunities still. I think it is just finding your niche.
Yeah.
I think the post-grad level, too, like, finding universities that you can partner with and, build those, like, kind of pipelines of students coming out of it.
Yeah.
So I think there definitely is the market, but I think, the shift over the last couple of years has maybe just been, as a country, we're trying to focus a little bit more on the STEM and science and make sure our students have that training if they're interested.
Yeah. If you could give a top tip to a foreign university who are looking to get more students from the US and work more in the US, what would be that kind of top tip or takeaway that you would want them to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the 2 top tips is, like, really look at the communications you're sending students and the timelines. Often they're probably not fitting what the U.S. market needs. Like, timeline-wise, I would say, like UK especially, I can't speak for other countries with their time communications, but they're often coming out a lot later than the U.S. market needs, especially for undergrad students, because we're often sending a lot of information to work with students, like, on the conversion piece, probably like May, June, when those, like, UCAS deadlines are coming out. But for U.S. students, they have to make their decision for their U.S. universities by May 1st. And that's usually the biggest competitor for their UK option. So I think if you can reach students, February, March, really like let them know about the facilities on campus and like the timeline and that they're going to be working on enrollment, kind of those pieces, it'll really help them hold on to that offer versus, committing to the US university.
Yeah.
And like communications too, just sending out timelines of like what's going to be happening over the summer. Because the way our registration is set up, they're usually doing that in early spring or summer for the fall.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. I think the other is just really make sure you have the resources to support US students, because going abroad is, a new thing for us a lot of times.
Yeah. And thank you for those top tips. That's super helpful. And just a follow-up question on that kind of level of engagement. It's probably hard to put a number to it, but what on average would you say the number of queries or questions that an applicant on average might have from the US?
Yeah, you mean like per applicant? Or?
Yeah, per applicant.
Ooh. So yeah, I'd say it kind of varies. I do have those students that they're pretty self-guided. It's really, they just need to find that one guidance page.
Yeah.
But I have students that, I maybe meet with them once a month just to kind of check in on them, or they, they maybe meet with me only once, but they pop up every couple of weeks with a question.
Yeah.
So I'd say like average, I'd probably say anywhere from like 6 to 10 times maybe through the cycle with a student.
I think having your experience of being an international student yourself, having made that big leap, and also be able to now work on behalf, you've worked for a couple of different universities now as well, and so you can speak so authentically about it. I think it's so important that they have that point of contact with you, so I can understand why they become really attached by the end. And your experience is critical to helping them through that journey.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's not even just questions about the university. It's just, what's it like to be from the US and move abroad. So I think, especially the students coming out of high school, like they're young, they maybe been abroad once or twice, but a lot of them haven't been at all. And I think just those questions about, am I going to fit in? But yeah, it's like great hearing from those students later on where, they're like, I got an offer, I couldn't have done this without you, or like I'm on campus. So.
Yeah. So it'd be good to understand, because universities are often, especially at the moment, because the US, there are more students potentially thinking about going outside of the US for studying. I guess for a university thinking about this option, from your experience, having been an in-country rep for a number of years now, how long would you say they would normally take to establish a presence in the US before they start to see a kind of return on investment, or they start to see more students kind of coming through that application pipeline? Is there a kind of rough estimate that you could provide?
Yeah, I think sometimes the expectation is that once you start doing recruitment events, you're going to get students that cycle. I think for the US, though, we do shop a lot earlier. So for the undergraduate side, I know, a lot of year 10, 11 students are usually the ones that you meet at fairs. You're not meeting year 12 students.
Yep.
So I think there is the expectation, if you went this year, you're going to get those entry of 2026 students, where really it's going to be 27, 28, even 29.
Yeah.
So I think really understanding when you're coming into the market is going to be a long-term investment, because you need to go to those initial events. You need to make sure you're communicating with those students you met, being there for all the questions throughout the year, like the next couple of years. So I think that, it's definitely a longer term, especially at the undergraduate level. I think post-grad, we maybe shop like a year or two ahead, but so I think that is one thing, just being really prepared for like a longer haul for getting into the market. And we are, I would say too, we are a lot more relationship based. So really keeping up with, if you meet counselors at high schools, being able to connect with them often and make sure they're on newsletters, that they have your contact information for all those little UCAS questions. Keeping in touch with the families and things like that. Because I think that's ultimately, we don't work with agents. We are a really relationship based market. So making sure you're coming to the US if you're not based in the US every couple times a year, and coming to conferences, coming to high schools is really important, keeping those relationships going.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that is quite unique about the US, is it's not through agents, unlike with a lot of other international markets that universities are working within. There's a huge reliance on agents, education agents, but in the US it's more, much more a relationship driven market around that kind of school counselor or university counselor or careers counselors.
I think a lot of universities expect their brand is going to be really well recognized in the US already. And I think because we aren't familiar with anything outside of study abroad exchanges up until recently, I think that is one thing. It takes those couple of years to build your brand and really, make sure you're keeping those connections going to help foster that. So
yeah, absolutely. And you just made me think of something I really wanted to ask you about, which is, or an observation I wanted to make, which is that I love the fact that we currently work with a number of universities, so I think over 15 universities now, and we have over 20 in-country reps alongside yourself,
Yep.
Carmen, based in the US, and you're all across the states. But what I love about you guys as a team of people representing different universities is you're so collegiate.
Yeah.
You work so closely together. I just wondered if you could share kind of what that experience is like from your side, how you collaborate with other universities and in-country reps, and kind of what does that bring to the table for college counsellors, school counsellors, or students?
Yeah, I mean, I think within the group, there's always those questions too, like, I've never been in the state. Do you have any recommendations for events, things like that? Or, we're always like asking about like the return on investment for events. Like newer reps too, like if they don't have necessarily like information about certain resources, we always help with that. But I think it's so nice too when we go to the same event, we'll kind of reach out and we're like, who's going to this fair? And we can start planning like those school visits. It's more valuable for their students too, because we can present like a wide range of options for them.
I love that. I think it's great that you guys work so closely together and support each other, and it's particularly that kind of referring. It's always what's best for the student, and finding the answer for the student or for the college counsellor or school counsellor, rather than about I'm only promoting my university and that's it.
So I think with it being such a different thing for the US, I think just us being able to lift up the idea of international education as a whole together is just so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wondered, because I know you're focused more on direct entry into a UK university, into Imperial. But do you come across or are you hearing more on the ground around partnerships? Are more students or universities or community colleges, for example, looking at creating kind of cohorts of students to look at international experiences, maybe first year study abroad programs, so like 1 year in the UK, 3 years in the US, or 1+1s at master's levels? Are you hearing or seeing much on the ground in the US around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely been an increase in like options in the industry and kind of ways we can engage a little bit more.
Yeah.
I haven't personally worked with community colleges much, but I know there's a lot more international universities, and we're going to like the Community College International Development Conference, I believe it is CCID.
Yep.
Because I think there are a lot of community colleges looking to really build that opportunity for their students, and then international universities trying to get those students as well.
Yeah.
I think that hasn't always been a traditional route, so I think that's one that's really grown over the last couple of years.
So thank you so much, Carmen, for joining me today and sharing so many different insights and top tips with everybody who's listening. Really appreciate your time, and it's lovely to catch you because Carmen is with me in London today.
Yeah.
So she's over from the US, and I really appreciate your time, and just continue doing the wonderful work that you're doing, flying the UK flag on behalf of the universities here, but also particularly focusing on Imperial and the work that you're doing there.
Thank you for having me today.